Lineatus. I am a registered nurse and I'm a public health nurse. And I moved up here to Mendocino County in 1996. I spent a couple years working as a med-surg nurse at Ukiah Valley Medical Center and then ended up working 10 years in the emergency room. After 10 years in the emergency room, I ended up working in the ICU and ended up in the director role there. And during that time, as an avid hiker and mountain biker, coming up here to Mendocino, I saw all the beautiful hills all around, and I thought, I'm going to be hiking and going all over the place and doing all this fun stuff. And in the first year that I was here, I did a lot of searching to try and find where those trails were, and found that I couldn't find them. And so we really don't have very many trails around here. So a group of friends of mine and I, we got together and started the Ukiah Valley Trail Group. A little after that, I ended up taking a job at Mendocino Community Health Clinics, and I was in charge of the nurses there. And so I was in charge of the nurses at the Hillside Clinic, over here at the Little Lake Clinic, and over in Lake County. And I was excited about that job because I thought I was finally going to be able to move back upstream from a health perspective. You know, working in the emergency room and in the ICU, you're taking care of people who have already made some bad decisions. And this next slide shows that we talk about social determinants of health. And you can see that that big 51% of it, this is the things that contribute to whether we're healthy or not healthy. And 51% of it is like totally under our control. The one thing that's not on that list, I didn't make this little graphic, is exercise. Exercise is another huge one on that list. And then the other piece of it is 19% environment, where we live, the air quality, water quality, of where we're at, that kind of thing. So as I was working with Ukiah Valley Trail Group, I started realizing that a lot of what we were doing was getting people out and getting exercising, and that we were actually promoting health. And I started reading and doing presentations and trying to promote my program. I started realizing, well, one of the ways you get people to be more active is you make more trails for them and make more opportunities for people to exercise. And the more you make opportunities available for people to exercise, the more they exercise. And so through this, I started thinking, well, this is what the kind of work I want to be doing. I don't want to be downstream where people have already made mistakes. I want to be upstream and helping people be healthy. And so I ended up quitting my job and at MCHC, at Mendocino Community Health Clinics, and started working to get the walk and bike Mendocino. And it was a little more gradual than that. You know, some friends of mine and I got Walk and Bike Mendocino together. And the difference between Walk and Bike Mendocino and Ukiah Valley Trail Group is that Ukiah Valley Trail Group is about the mission is to create and maintain a trail system that will improve our community's quality of life and health. And so it's about building trails, primarily hiking trails. Walk and Bike Mendocino is more of an advocacy and encouragement group where we're doing more work to try and get people exercising. So the two groups complement one another, and I spend about 80% of my time working for Walk and Bike Mendocino and 20% of my time working for Ukiah Valley Trail Group. Of course, you could also cut both of those numbers in half and say I spend 50% of my time trying to raise money for those things and 50% of the time doing those things. But we won't say that. You could say that, but we won't say that. So anyway, that's kind of my long introduction to who I am and what I'm doing here, and also an introduction to this idea of the social determinants of health and how our decisions of how we behave and our behaviors and habits and the environment that we live in have such a big effect on our health. So the built environment is a public health snazzy term for how we design our communities. How do we set up our cities and our towns? Where do we have do we have a factory right next to the school ground? Do we have the parks near the school grounds? Can people walk easily from one place to another? So the built environment is simply how we design things. I am going to walk in front of the screen now to say, and if you look at this, this picture here, this is kind of a traditional suburban development. And you can see it's got that big circle place. And typically what you'll see is right on this road right here will be what we call an arterial. So you go back into your neighborhood and you're doing whatever you're doing back there. And when you want to go someplace, you come out to this arterial where there's big cars going fast. And so if you have Johnny, who lives in this house, and his friend Steve, who lives over in this house, they can't walk to see one another because of the way the community is designed. They're going to have to walk or ride their bikes out to this major street, go all the way around to see the same. Same thing with the parents. If mom and dad have friends who live 4 houses away, they can't necessarily get to the other house. So we're building an environment in that case in a way that it discourages people from exercising. So we want to make the healthy choice the easy choice, and we're not doing it very well in this case. So in Willets, I don't know if you've looked at Google Earth images of Willets, but what we have here is the north end of Willets, there's the high school, and this is Brook Trails. So the road that goes up to Brook Trails is very similar to that Brook Trails subdivision. It's not the same kind of subdivision, but structurally it's the same. There's one way in and one way out. And to make it worse, there's no sidewalks, it's narrow, and it's steep. So it's kind of like this perfect trifecta of discouraging people from exercising. You've been doing some pretty cool things, at least I think they're cool. I know they're not universally popular, but the new bypass being built, and I'm blanking on the word for the relinquishment. Caltrans is relinquishing the Main Street back to public use now, and so there's good things happening there. And put in some raised walkways like that in the other picture there that slows traffic down and makes it more comfortable for people to walk because traffic's being slowed down. These are good things that are happening in Willets right now, but they take a lot of time. So you did have these, I don't know if any of you were at these meetings that we had 6 months ago. So this was some of the group meetings, community meetings that we had about how to change things, and people drew pictures and did lines and things. And part of the reason I wanted to say this is that this really makes a huge difference. How we plan these roads, and it's great to see that room full of people putting in input, because this is our children's and our grandchildren's health right here. If we can make these changes on Main Street and make it more walkable and bikeable, we'll have a more healthy community. Now, one of the things that I'm working on is Safe Routes to School programs. Walk and Bike Mendocino has a contract with Mendocino Council of Governments, and we're working with Mendocino County Health and Human Services on Safe Routes to School programs. And we're doing this in 7 different communities throughout the county. One of them is Willets. And specifically, we were tasked with working at Blosser Lane Elementary, or Blosser Elementary. And these are 2 of the main roads that come to Blosser Elementary. And as you can see, they don't look terribly inviting to walking or biking. And what's happened is that the powers that be, the parents, administrators at Blosser, they've actually taken the bike racks away, so that, because they're discouraging kids from riding their bikes to school because they feel like it's dangerous.
I agree with that one. For Blosser. Yeah.
Perhaps so. Perhaps so. We'll talk a little bit more about it. But yeah, like you can see, Della Avenue there has no sidewalks. It's narrow streets. People drive too fast. And then over here we have where Blosser goes over to Coast at Highway 20. And that's clearly people coming in from Fort Bragg at high speed. I've caught myself doing it. You're coming into town and you're in full gear, and all of a sudden you realize you're going 50 miles an hour and you're pretty much in town. And I'm like, I'm aware of this.
I think at one point they talked about putting this signal light there. Didn't they a while back?
I hadn't heard about a signal light. A signal light's an option.
Not recently, but there's been some accidents or something, and they talked about doing that, but they never did.
Yeah, these projects take a long time to do, and they're really expensive. One thing, to me, ideally what we need there is a roundabout. Roundabouts will slow traffic down. They've got a great...
Is there enough room?
There is. There's enough room there to make a roundabout. They're very expensive, which just is the truth about roads. Roads are expensive. And so I think we struggle sometimes with saying we're going to go ahead and spend the money because when we talk about bikes and pedestrians, because we think, well, there's not very many people doing that, so we don't want to spend the money on it. It gets more attention. We do huge, expensive projects to make it easier to drive all the time. And we don't think about it. Those of us who are just everyday citizens, no one says, well, how much is it going to cost to make that bypass? Well, some people probably talked about it. Sorry. So we did talk about how much it costs to go. We did talk about that. But generally speaking, road projects and highway projects that are making it easier to drive cars, most often the bypass is an exception.
most often just go under the radar and people don't pay much attention, and we don't realize how much it costs to do it. We know that it costs about $1 million a mile to build just simple 2-lane rural roads. It's expensive. It's really expensive. And so when we say, well, we want to do these treatments to make it safer for bicyclists and pedestrians, and it's going to cost $1.5 million, people who aren't used to realizing that that's what things just cost go kind of bananas. You know, no way do we want to spend that much money. But we're not allowing our kids to walk or bike to school, so that's a big deal. And it's a big deal because we're looking at an epidemic of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and these things are directly correlated to less exercise. When I went to school, we all walked and biked to school. It was a given. And now it's in Marin County, or where are we? We were just talking about where we were from. Mendocino County, it's about 5% of our kids walk or bike to school. And we have these increasing rates of obesity, diabetes. We have kids who are in high school who are already showing signs and symptoms of cardiovascular disease, elevated levels of elevated cholesterol levels, for example, in 18-year-old kids. So there's some things that we can do, though, kind of a little cheaper. And so this is a drawing, a conceptual drawing, where they've essentially narrowed the lane and narrowed the crosswalk simply with paint. And so the idea here is you paint in this bulb out, is kind of the term they often use for it, and put paint there, and you can put what they call delineators. Those are these little plastic things that stick up, and if you hit them with your car, they just bounce over. But you could do that, and by bringing that out this far, you probably make that crosswalk 20% less. You know, you're allowing people to get that much farther across there. It also, as you constrain the width of lanes, you slow cars down and make people drive a little. People just naturally will drive slower as that happens. So these are some cheaper options that don't require as much work. Now you get into tactical urbanism is one of the terms that they got. You've actually got some tactical urbanism projects right out here around the corner where they put in little planters and stuff. There used to be parking spaces there. They put in the little planters. They will slow traffic down. Statistically, we know that's true. They do make it safer for pedestrians because you can get farther across the street before you start. And you can do really creative things with it. And you can do creative things that are very inexpensive. You can do creative things that are also very, that look really good. Unfortunately, I should have made some slides of ones that are cheap that look really good. I didn't put a slide in there. But I did do a slide that's really cheap. Now in this case, these are kind of like the official version of these kind of delineators. These ones over here, if you can see, those are toilet plungers.
Oh, yeah, they are.
So this, I think, was in Kansas, I think, and it happened just recently. Some bicyclists, unknown bicyclists, some tactical urbanists, went out and bought these toilet plungers and just glued them to the ground. And it's really remarkable as a pedestrian or a bicyclist, just having that little physical thing makes you feel much safer.
Yeah,
now, statistically, we don't really know. I'm not sure if it really decreases accident rates or collision rates, but it certainly makes you feel more comfortable and more ready to go out and walk or bike when you have just that little bit of thing. Now, the toilet plungers did only last about 24 hours, I think, before somebody from the city came in and said, no, you don't get to do this. But still, I think it made a very dramatic point that, you know, one, that we have bicyclists who really want this kind of infrastructure, and two, it can make a difference, and three, they literally put it in overnight when no one was looking. You know,
I like it. I think it's great.
It's a pretty simple thing.
Yeah, and it didn't cost a lot of money.
So if our infrastructure is lousy, you can't exercise, and here's the difficult part of kind of the kind of presentations that I end up doing about this is we talk about how dangerous the streets are, and then talk about but we think you should walk and bike. And this is the kind of the marketing mistake that we've been making for the last 20 years. Our marketing message to bicyclists and pedestrians, in particular for bicyclists, is you should ride a bike. It's really great. You know, it's good for the environment, it's good for your health, you'll save money, it's a wonderful thing to do, but for goodness sake, never get on your bike without a helmet. And as soon as you say that, what people hear is, riding a bike is really dangerous, I don't want to do it.
I don't want to take that risk. And we stab ourselves right in the back in our own marketing pitch by talking about safety and the importance of helmets. So one of the things that I want to introduce is that, yeah, our infrastructure is not great, but that doesn't mean that we can't exercise. That doesn't mean that it's a bad idea to go out there. We have on our Facebook page, Walking Bike Mendocino, on our Facebook page and on our website, a number of photos of people riding bikes without helmets. And that sometimes really draws ire. Oh my goodness, what are you doing showing people riding a bike without a helmet? If wearing a helmet makes you more likely to ride a bike, then by all means wear the helmet. If wearing a helmet makes you less likely to ride a bike, it's okay to ride your bike without a helmet. And the reason I say that is because the research backs me up. The Journal of the American Medical Association tells us that the health benefit to risk of ratio of riding a bike is 20 to 1. You get 20 times the health benefit as you do risk. So there's tremendous health benefit. And one of the things about this particular study is that they looked at all bicyclists and all behaviors. So we also know that 50% of the mortality on bicycles, the person's under the influence. So if you're not under the influence, if we did that same survey, that same study, and said, let's only look at people who are sober, this goes up to 40 to 1. Más o menos. If we said, let's only look at people who are obeying the laws and making good and riding predictably, it would go up even higher. If we said, let's only look at people who are riding a bike like hers, where she's sitting up in this nice upright position where she can see. Now I ride bikes for recreation and fitness, and I ride one that puts me down like this. And I'll tell you, you can't not see as well what's going on around you when you're in this position as you can when you're up like this. And so this is one of the problems that we have is we tend to buy bikes that put us down. We act like we're Lance Armstrong on the way to the Tour de France.
It's a racing bike.
We tend to have racing bikes, and they're not as safe. Your weight's farther forward. If you crash, if you hit something, you're much more likely to go head first, do a Superman over the handlebars. Your field of vision isn't as good. I'll try not to rant and stay on this subject, but this is a much more logical bike, and if we looked at only people who were riding in that manner, we would see this number go up even farther. You can take it a step farther and say, if you looked at people who are only riding about 8 to 10 miles an hour most of the time, which is the way you're going to ride around town on a bike like this, again, you're going to see this pop up even higher. We have this culture of fear, and we fear things that out of proportion to their real risk. So I've got the picture of the baby there, because I'll tell you, in 10 years of working as an emergency room nurse, I never saw a toddler who had a head injury from tipping over while they were learning to walk. And yet that's how that helmet is being marketed. You know, this is being marketed by a helmet for your child to protect them. This isn't like this isn't a kid with a health needs. This is like, you know, oh, little baby Susie's going to try walking today, let's put a helmet on her. You know, and so it's a culture of fear, and we need to really think about what the risks and benefits of our activities are. And of course, if we want to live to be a ripe old age, and a healthy ripe old age, an active ripe old age, riding your bike every day with or without a helmet is a great way to think about doing it, even though we don't have great infrastructure for it. You're probably thinking you came because you're thinking about exercising more, and maybe you want to. He's like, no. The cameraman's like, no way. but actually, that's great because it starts with intention. And the first thing that we can think about in terms of our intention is how strong is our motivation. And you can think of your personal intention or motivation on a scale of -10 to +10. -10 would be our cameraman. No way, no how, I don't feel like it, I don't like it, I don't want to, you can't make me. Okay, that's -10. 0 at the middle of that is meh. Yeah, maybe. I couldn't. Not sure. +10 is I'm on fire. I don't want to even sit here and listen to this guy anymore because I'm going to go exercise right now. So your first evaluation and first question for yourself is, where's your level of motivation? How interested are you in this? How meaningful is it? How important is it for you to do this? And you can actually kind of put a little number in your head. I think I'm about a 4, whatever it is. So then the other thing that we want to think about is, what are your motivators? What are the things that make you want to exercise?
And it could be a negative kind of thing. It could be somebody has diabetes, and you're saying, well, my doctor told me that if I don't start exercising, I might have to go on to insulin and start taking shots, and I just want to stick with the pills. So that would be a good motivator to exercise. I really don't want to end up on insulin. But the bad part of that is that it's a negative motivator. It's like, this is something I don't want to do. And our research tells us that people do better with a motivator that's positive. So rather than saying, I don't want to end up on insulin, what I do want to do is I say, well, with my diabetes, if I don't get my blood sugar under control, I love to needlepoint. And my doctor's telling me that I could lose my eyesight. My eyesight will gradually get worse. So I want to make sure that I can continue to do needlepoint. That's a positive motivator, a positive thing to think about that might, and it could be, I want to lose some weight so I can wear my new dress, or I want to, it can be all kinds of different things. But generally speaking, the research tells us that a positive motivator will work better than a negative motivator. But, you can, whatever works, I mean, if you've got something that's a really strong negative thing, I don't want to gain any more weight, I don't want to be as fat as that guy, that could work too. So the next kind of 3 things I just want to mention really quickly here are prompts, commitments, and support. So prompts, if you're trying to start a new exercise habit, a prompt is a reminder. So if you've said, I think I want to start walking to work every day, and you realize that, well, one of the things that I have to do, you're walking out the door, you're just about to go, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm wearing the wrong shoes. These aren't good walking shoes. So you can say, well, the prompt I'm going to use to help me better remember this is I'm going to take the good walking shoes and I'm going to put them right by the door, so I can't go out the door without moving my shoes. And that'll help me remember to put those shoes on. Or you could put, where you pull your shoes out, a little sign that says, remember the right shoes, or I'm walking today. That's a prompt. A prompt could also be something that you put on your refrigerator, a visual thing that prompts you that what you want to do. Yeah?
Bathroom mirror.
Bathroom mirror works. The one thing with prompts that you have to remember, though, is that anything that you put up on the wall becomes wallpaper pretty soon. You stop noticing it.
But not on the mirror.
On the mirror,
Brushing your teeth.
yeah, maybe. And that part of it also is, if that works well for you, then great, do it. But the prompt being as close to your desired behavior as possible is also very important. If your prompt comes 3 hours before you leave the door to leave, or before you're going to engage, it's not necessarily going to be as valuable as if your prompt is immediately before what you want to do. And that's why I say the shoes right by the door, so you can't open the door without doing it, would be a prompt that's very immediate. Another prompt that would be very immediate is you're deciding, well, I don't want to drive my car anytime I'm going less than 2 miles. I'm going to walk whenever I'm going short distances. And you can put a little sign right on the steering wheel that says, I walk. And so when you put your hands on this, you say, oh yeah, actually I'm only going 3/4 of a mile. I'm not going to drive now, I'm going to walk. That would be a prompt that's right immediate to where your desired behavior change is. Commitments are, you use the same sign, and your sign is saying, I'm committing to do this. As a young man, I smoked cigarettes for a few years. And without realizing I was engaging in 2 best practices, I did 2 things. I set a date that I was going to quit smoking. I said, I'm going to quit smoking on this date. And then I told all my friends. And I joked before we started this presentation about my big ego. Well, my big ego, and I knew this about myself, I knew if I tell all my friends I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to be too embarrassed not to smoke. It was a big motivator to me to have that commitment. So what I was also doing was making a public commitment. So you can make a commitment to yourself. I'm going to do a 2-mile challenge. I'm never going to drive my car when I'm going less than 2 miles. But you can make that commitment stronger by making it a public commitment. And then the third thing is support. That's teaming up with other people, saying, we're going to have a little bond. We're going to have this thing together. We're both going to make this commitment to one another. And you can make public commitments too. That would be when you put it out on Facebook. You say, I am doing this. I'm going to be one of the people that always walks when I'm going short distances. So those are prompts, commitments, and support. Those are 3 little tools that you can use to help you develop your motivation, get more motivated, and remember some of these things better. So one of the first questions, and actually I've got a little handout, and pencils, everybody can do work. We can actually work on this stuff. So, pass those around there. So what I've done is I put one of the first choices that I'm going to encourage you to make, if you're thinking about trying to make exercise a routine part of your life, one of your choices is, do you want to do a workout routine where you're saying, I'm going to go lift weights for an hour a day, I'm going to go ride my bike for 15 miles, I'm going to work out and I'm setting aside this time to do my workout routine. That's one approach. The other approach is to say, I'm going to use routine exercise. And where I'm going to really end up going is that I think for most of us, a combination of these 2 things is the good approach. What you can do with that paper is think about what are the barriers and benefits to either one of these approaches. What for you, a workout routine, what are the benefits for you personally? So for me personally, it might be, if I make that, I've got friends and we all meet at the health club and we all work out together on Tuesday and that works great for me, that's a great benefit. Some of the barriers include equipment costs, maintenance of those things. You have to set time aside specifically for it. If you don't do it at this time, I know this is something that I struggle with when I do an exercise. I know that if I get out and I exercise first thing in the morning, I get it done. And like every minute of the day that goes by that I don't exercise, the probability that I won't exercise that day goes up a lot. And even though I know that, I still struggle with that. And it's one of the problems with doing a workout routine, is that if you miss that time that you would kind of plan to do it, the chance that you'll do it drops off a cliff. So you'll see on that little piece of paper, it's got barriers and benefits, and then it's got 2 little smaller columns. So the other thing that I suggest that you try with this is that you actually put a number rating next to each of those. How big a barrier is that to you? I don't have the money to buy my club membership. Well, if you don't have the money for your membership, that's probably a 10. It's a big barrier if you can't afford it. But on the other hand, if you don't have your membership and you just because it's expired and all you have to do is go by there, then it's a pretty low barrier. It's only a 2 maybe. And I would also encourage you, as you rate barriers on a scale of 0 to 10, I would make it 0 to negative 10. Because it's a barrier. And then your benefits, you make 0 to positive 10. And as you go through those things, then you can actually come up with a little score. And one of the things that I don't know if I've got it on this next slide or not. So anyway, I'll come back to that in a moment, I think. So the opposite thing would be to do exercise as a regular part of your life. And that's, walking or riding to school, doing your errands, doing gardening, stop and shop, I think I called it. That's where you park your car and go do multiple errands rather than getting back in your car and driving. And so for me, I walk and bike, I live only a little over a mile from where I work, and it's pretty flat, and so it's really convenient for me, and I'm in pretty good habit now of walking or biking pretty much every day. And then on the weekends, I'm out doing the weekend warrior thing, getting a little extra exercise. So one of the downsides to routine exercise is that you still have to make it a habit, and if you don't get it habitualized, it doesn't help. And it tends to be low intensity. Now, on the other hand, with that low intensity work, we have very strong evidence now that if your goal is to, I think they're now saying 40 to 45 minutes of exercise 4 times a week is kind of your minimum amount of exercise, you can get that 45 minutes of exercise 10 minutes at a time. It does not have to be all at once. You can do it 10 minutes now, 10 minutes at lunch, 10 minutes before dinner, 10 minutes after dinner, and you're good, except that you only made 40 minutes instead of 45 minutes. But that's where your math quizzes. So it's low intensity, but you still can get your exercise, and it works. That it counts. The other thing to think about, and I try and remember that we've got studies now that say that it's better to be fit and fat, like me, than to be skinny and not fit. Cardiovascularly, even if you're overweight, if you're out getting routine exercise, you are going to live longer than a person who's skinny It doesn't. And you see guys like me on the weekend, we got our Lycra on and our guts kind of hanging out like this, and you're kind of going, what is it? Well, I may look a little silly, but I'm going to live a long time, and I rode 35 miles pretty easily this weekend. And so that's another thing to just remember. We want to get that routine exercise. Go ahead and exercise, and remember that we don't have to get all the exercise at once. It doesn't have to be super high intensity, and it can be. We already said that, not all at once. So why is it so hard to make these new habits? Well, we're often on autopilot, and one of the things that I think about a lot is how we get in the habit of driving a car. Most of us started driving cars when we were 16 to 18 years old, and we never really thought about it, but we practiced, and we were super high motivated. When you're 17 years old and you get your driver's license and you say, well, how high is on a motivation factor from -10, not wanting to at all, to +10 of really wanting to drive, at 17, 18 years old, you are off the chart. You're at 11 or 12 or 15 wanting to drive.
That's right.
And so you're highly, highly motivated to learn all of these behaviors and figure out all these little things that you have to do in order to do this. So when we decide, well, I'm going to walk all the time or I'm going to bike all the time, we have to go through that same process. You have to learn all these individual steps. Our motivation just isn't quite as high. And now we've been practicing driving cars for, well, however long it's been since you've been that old. So there's tons of little behaviors to overcome. So I guess we already kind of said, one of your first decisions is, do you want to do routine exercise or both? And you want to think about what are the specific barriers for you personally. And very, very specifically, the more you can get down to specific of what's the particular barrier. And I'll give you an example. I've been wanting to ride recreationally and for fitness more often. I do pretty good now about walking and biking for getting to school, to work and back. But there's a ride coming up in May. It's a 60-mile ride with a lot of hills, and I'd like to do that. And I know that I need to ride more than just on the weekends. And so I keep thinking, Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, if I could just get up in the morning and exercise, get in a quick little, I got 45 minutes in, that would be great. And I'm not getting it done. And so I was thinking about it, well, what's the problem? And I finally realized what it is that I get up and I think, well, I should go on a ride, but I have to get this done and this done and this time. And I realized that 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. period is one of the most productive times of my workday. I get to work before my colleagues do, and I have uninterrupted time. So it's that very specific thing. That's what's going on in my head. When I make the decision to walk out the front door and head to work rather than getting on my bicycle, it's that very specific thing. I'm thinking, I need to get to work because I don't want to miss this prime opportunity. Now, I'll tell you, I haven't solved this yet. But I've gotten that far. I know exactly what the problem is. And now I have to make that decision. I have to say, well, do I just really have to say to myself, no, I'm going to make exercising a habit, a priority and do it right then? Or am I going to work at some other strategy to get the exercise at a different time?
How about a 2-hour lunch?
A 2-hour lunch might work.
That's
And
the exercise.
that's the kind of thing, yeah, now I need to start thinking creatively, because it might be, I need to go home, get a ride in, do it at that time. But the problem, of course, as we talked about earlier, every minute in the day that goes by, the chance that you aren't going to exercise goes up. But that is one of my possibilities.
Get up an hour earlier.
Get up an hour earlier. Somehow that
That
doesn't
would be-
seem to be happening.
The thing is, because morning is where you get your energy, that's when you,
Yeah, that's
Get up
another
an hour
option.
earlier.
So
That's
So
so
the
the
rest
your
of this-
private time at work,
yeah,
and it gives you time to ride.
the rest of this presentation, I'm going to have you guys help me figure out how to get my exercise routine together. So you're going to be thinking about what exactly your benefits are. And one of the things that I want to say is don't believe everything you think. We have very strong research now, too, that as human beings, we are hardwired to stick to decisions that we make. We make decisions, we come to conclusions, and we do not budge from them. So if you're thinking, oh, I definitely want to do an exercise, a workout routine, and that's the way I want to go about it, think about making that list of barriers and benefits and really evaluating them and be very intentional about your decision making about this. Because you may be thinking, that'll never work for me, or this can only work for me. And sometimes we really need to get out of our routine and think about, well, maybe there's a different way. Maybe don't believe everything you think. So this is just some, we'll just keep moving on, because this is just some examples of the kind of things that you might want to do. If you were saying, well, what are the benefits to working out? Barriers. A barrier would be it's a long way to the gym, my membership expired, I always get too busy before I go. And then each one of these things, again, you can put on the barriers one, a negative score, how much of a barrier is that, and on the positive one, a positive score. And then do the same thing for routine exercise. You know, one of the barriers is I don't feel safe, the street's narrow. I don't know how I'll carry my stuff. And again, identifying each one of these things is a key to overcoming them, because like with me, I wasn't really thinking about what that specific thing was that was keeping me from doing what I want to do. That brings us to the idea of behavior chains. And this is kind of what we worked through when we learned how to drive our car. The same kind of process for riding a bike we did as we drove our car. And I'm going to just, you're reading those already. So what the corollary to this is you drive your car. The first thing you have to do to be able to drive your car is you have to get a license. You have to learn how. You have to have a car. The car has to work. You have to know there has to be gas in it. You have to know you have to have some way to get more gas. You have to know how to put the gas into the car. And if you think back, there was a time when we put gas into the car for the first time and we struggled with it. It was like, well, how exactly do I do this? Every one of these steps, when you're thinking, this is the behavior that I want to engage in, if you write out a behavior chain, that chain of activities that you have, because every one of those things, okay, my bike has to work, it's not working, so I need to get it to the shop because I don't know how to fix it. How do I get it to the shop? Every one of those things are potential absolute barriers for you. And the more you get down to very fine detail, the better you're going to be able to kind of say, well, this is how I'm going to deal with this. And at that point, you can go back to the previous thing where we talked about prompts and commitments and say, well, what's the prompt that I can give myself to remind myself to get my bike to the shop so it gets fixed? Because that's the thing that's my barrier right now. My bike's not working. I know I just need to get it down there. What's the prompt I give myself to remind myself to get to that? And you work your way through that list. So that's pretty much what I've got. And what I just, a quick review of what I went over is, one, I want to, if you're wanting to establish new behaviors, then be intentional. I think we tend to not really think about it. We think kind of in very broad, grandiose terms. Well, I want to exercise, or I want to lift weights, or whatever it is, but we're not starting that habit. So the first thing is to be intentional. Is that really the best way for me to get my exercise, or should I be looking at other ways? And when you've decided that that's really where you want to focus your energy on, then make lists of the barriers and benefits. And really think about what specifically for you is the thing. It may be, I want to, I'm getting close enough now that I'm thinking about retirement, and I want to be able to keep backpacking after I retire. I want to be able to backpack with my grandkids. That's something that I think about when I find myself exercising. My grandkids are just getting old enough now that pretty soon they'll be able to go backpacking with us. And so I'm like, I want to stay fit enough so that I can go backpacking with my grandkids. Very specific things, all of these, and personalized. So you're really bringing it into your own heart. Weight your lists so that when you're making the list of barriers and benefits, think about it from positive 10 to negative 10, depending on whether it's a positive or a negative thing. Identify your behavior chains, and then use prompts, commitments, and support to help reinforce the habits that you're trying to develop. And with that, I just want to point out 45 minutes.
On the nose.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Perfect. Very good.
And so, so I'm happy to answer some questions now if people have any.
Could you give an example of a behavior chain again?
Sure. Your behavior chain would be, I've decided that I want to ride my bike to work every day instead of driving my car. So again, the riding your bike thing. Well, actually, that's not a good example because we kind of went down that one. Let's say the behavior chain is that I live in brook trails, And so it's not convenient for me to walk or ride my bike. Not convenient, it's like virtually impossible for me to walk or bike to work. So instead I'm going to do a stop and shop kind of thing, or I'm going to drive my car down to the bottom of the hill, I'm going to park it, and then I'm going to go walk from place to place. So what's the behavior change?
That's what I do,
Good for you.
yeah, because I live in the valley.
And it doesn't work, it's too
Well,
far.
I can walk, but it's not really safe.
Right.
So I go to the state gate park, and I walk all over town.
Perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. So some of the things that you're going to have to think about is like, well, do you have to dress different? Or you have to wear different shoes? Depends on the weather. When when you're riding in a climate-controlled car, you just get in your car. And that's the kind of things, you walk outside and you're thinking, oh, today I'm going to take up this new habit. And you go, oh, it's cold. Well, shoot, I'm going to just drive today.
Get your coat.
But it's the kind of, when you have that really strong habit that's easy to fall back on. So your behavior chain is going to be, well, what do I need to do this? I've got to have a car and the car's got to work. I've got that. Where am I going to park? You got to know where you're going to park. Is the car going to be safe? That's Willits, probably okay. You've got to know that you've got the right shoes. How are you going to carry stuff?
Backpack.
A backpack. Okay. It's not most of these things aren't terribly complicated, but they're the little things that will get in your way when you're in a hurry in the morning, or when you're trying to break out of that routine that you always fall back on. I mean, we've all had the experience of getting in the car and driving someplace and getting there and all of a sudden going, how did I get here? Well, we're driving without even thinking about it because we're so good at driving and so practiced at driving. And that's the way so many of our habits, so much of our day goes by that way. And it's a struggle to go ahead and say, it means now I have to stop and think about things. Rather than just letting my mind wander, I have to stop and think, well, how am I going to deal with this today? Where am I going to park? How am I going to go from place to place? How am I going to carry things? What kind of shoes should I wear? What if something comes up in the middle of the day that I need to get back to my car? What if all the little steps. So the behavior change is simply,
Then you have your phone.
you've got your phone. The phone makes a big difference these days. Yeah.
Yeah, bring your phone in case something happens.
Mm-hmm.
You can get on the phone, call somebody.
And another thing to think about, we tend to think that the car is way faster, even in a small town, than walking, and oftentimes it's not that much faster. You know, a mile takes about 17 minutes, 18 minutes, 17 to 20 minutes to walk a mile. And if you get in your car and drive a mile, it's going to take you 5, 7. You know, I mean, I'm not as familiar with Willits as I am in Ukiah, but in Ukiah, a lot of times you still, I'm parked 3 blocks away from where I'm at, so I walk 3 blocks to my car, then I drive the mile, and then I park 3 blocks from where I want to be, and I walk, and now all of a sudden I'm saying, well, it just took me 9 minutes to drive what it would have taken me 17 minutes to walk. And so, and that 17 minutes is 17 minutes of the 45 minutes of exercise that you wanted for the day. So that's another kind of thing that I think we get hung up on. And there's the convenience of driving the car. I've got all of my stuff in there. I know where this is. I've got a coat in the back, and I got an umbrella there, and I've got my bags for shopping, and all of that stuff's already there. When you switch over to walking for those things, you learn to have a bag, and the bag probably has smaller bags in it, and it's got your phone in it, and and you've remembered to charge your phone up before because you can't charge it in the car anymore. The little things. And the more you can make that behavior chain as detailed as possible, the better you're going to be able
You gotta plan it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's what we do we did it when we were 18 years old driving a car, and we've been doing it every day since then. And it seems like, well, it's so easy to drive a car. Well, yeah, it's easy to do anything if you practice it every day for 40 years. Anything else?
I really like that research that says you don't have to do it for an hour, you can do it for 15 minutes and then later today.
Every little
And
bit.
that's encouraging.
Mhm.
Sometimes if you get tired or you get a neighbor who won't quit talking, and that doesn't count.
Well, and it's a funny thing because also, one of the things that I love about walking and riding my bike to work and back is that I do see neighbors, and I do see people that I don't see as often. If I was in my car, I would speed by them, I might wave at them, but when I'm walking or riding my bike, I stop. Hey, Joe, how you doing? And we chat. And sometimes it ends up being a barrier, because I'm like, well, really, I gotta go. But for the most part, you know, you're just so much more connected to your community when you're walking and biking. You know, the trees are all starting to bloom. There's different birds coming in and singing. It puts you in a good mood. The kids are playing in the park over there. There's just all these sights and smells and sounds. And when you're in your car, you're totally, you know, insulated from that. And, you know, if you're like me, you turn on the radio and some numbskull is telling me things that piss me off.
I don't listen to that.
You know, it's probably a better idea to listen to some music. But yeah, I mean, it really is a very positive way to start and end the day. You know, ending the day. You know, I'll ride my bike, and oftentimes I'll walk with my bike home. I'll walk halfway or more of the way home, just because I don't want to get home quite so fast. I want to enjoy that kind of time of that kind of slow down time at the end of the day.
So it doesn't matter if you're aerobic, if your heart rate is at a certain speed, it's still healthy.
It's still healthy. Being active is one of the real keys.
Right.
This is, you know, I think, you know, if you go back 1,000 years, most of the time people were active every single day. They weren't necessarily running all day long, but they were being active all day long.
They were working in the garden.
They were working in the garden, they were hunting, they were picking things off the tree, they were going to where the water was, they were moving because it's the seasons
And they were walking
changing.
to do things because not everybody had cars.
Constantly
Cars
moving.
weren't a thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think there's definite benefit in getting a good cardiovascular workout, and I would hesitate to recommend not doing that. Was that a convoluted enough way of saying that? You know, I think it's important to try and get some cardiovascular work into your routine every once in a while. But that can also be a good brisk walk. I mean, one of the great there's a program called Walk Yourself Thin that I think is really wonderful, and his whole concept is that you should walk for an hour every day. You start walking every day, and he said, walk as fast as you're comfortable. You know, just until you're just kind of like, any faster than this and it's not going to be comfortable. Just as fast as you're comfortable, and do that every day, and a little bit longer every day until you can walk for an hour. And then walk for an hour every day as fast as you're comfortable. And he has a great, well thought out explanation of why you will lose weight if you do that. The key is you have to do it every day, and you have to walk as fast as you're comfortable. I tried it for a little while, and I found out that I found myself strolling along. It's like looking at the birds and stopping to talk to neighbors. And so it didn't really work so well for me. But I think trying to get that combination of having an active everyday life, and then maybe also once or twice a week anyway, if not a little bit more, but at least once or twice, getting a little bit more. And that cardiovascular work can be just good brisk walk.
And I walk every day.
Good for you.
Yeah, and like you said, the same thing. And I take my cute little dogs with me and we're gone.
Dogs are a great excuse to
Yeah.
walk.
You talk about looking at the birds as a negative.
Yeah.
Becoming a bird watcher would be the positive to get you out there.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I part of the reason I say that is because I am a birder, and it's something that will get me out to walk.
Then-
You know,
Why present it in that manner?
I'm sorry, I didn't even remember that I did. I said, I said you might get distracted and have
Yeah,
take
right.
longer. You know.
It'll slow up your pace.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
it gets you out there in the first place,
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we're talking about being active. Being active is good, and whatever does it is perfect.
There's another theory too. When you're out walking and stuff, it's okay to stop. It's okay, you know, like you stop and talk to somebody. It doesn't really mess up your routine. It's okay.
No,
to-
and actually, you know, if you're getting your heart rate up, it takes a while for your heart rate to come down. So if let's say you're riding your bike and you're riding along at a fairly brisk pace and your heart rate's up at whatever higher level it is, and you stop, and you've been riding for 15 minutes and now you stop for 10 minutes. Well, your heart rate's just getting back down to its normal after that 10 minutes when you start again. So if you take that 10 minutes, your heart rate's actually, you're going to get more because your heart rate's going higher, you're burning calories longer, you're actually getting benefit for that time. And so if you were to do a exercise routine where you know, and some people do this, you know, they'll do walk, run kind of things. You run for 3 minutes and then walk for a minute, run. Some people do some things like that. But that's a benefit of exercising more often. You get your heart rate up, it takes a little while to come on back down. And even in that time where it's taking to come back down, you're still getting benefit of some cardiovascular work.
Yeah, exactly. I walk pretty briskly. And then there's times where I slow down a little bit and then I go again, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fartlek, they call that.
They call it what?
Fartlek. It's Norwegian or something. It's called speed play.
Interval training, they used to call it. I used to do bike
Yeah.
racing, believe it or not. I used to do bike racing back home, and it was interval training. You'd go fast, and then you slow down for a bit, and then you go fast, and you slow down for a bit.
And fartlek, it's called speed play. It's the same kind of thing.
Right.
Instead of doing it as, you just every once in a while speed up,
Yeah.
kind of, and then for a while then slow down.
Right.
But yeah, definitely.
But it works.
It works.
Yeah. I think whatever you do is beneficial.
Me personally?
No,
Oh,
people,
that's
just
all
anybody.
excited. I thought.
I mean, I've got friends that do nothing.
Yeah.
You know, they've got issues like, well, you know, I have this and I have that. So get out and walk around the block. Just
Yeah.
walk around the block every day, just to get started. Do something.
I think we all know that's the dangerous cycle you get into. You know, you get overweight, you start having joint problems, you start having things that make it difficult to exercise. And once you start going down that road, it gets way more difficult to exercise. And just in terms of habit, I mean, I know this over the years. You know, I used to exercise a lot. I used to race bikes and do stuff, and even then, you know, I realized, you know, if I didn't when you're in the habit of exercising every day, it feels totally abnormal not to do it.
Yeah.
And then it can flip though to where you're not exercising and it's like this huge mountain to get up to start again.
Yeah.
But one of the ways to start is just be active every day.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell people, you know, that I can't walk like you do. I said, you don't have to walk like I do.
Well, that's one of the beautiful things that you
Just
about
start walking.
that walk yourself thin thing. His thing is you walk as far as you can comfortably, as quickly as you can comfortably, and you do it every day.
Yeah.
And so if you can only walk for 3 minutes, great, walk for 3 minutes. And then tomorrow's, you know, just walk as far as you can comfortably,
Exactly.
for as fast as you can comfortably. And tomorrow you might make it 4 minutes, and next week you might make it 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And the week after that, you're 15 minutes. And he says, then once you get up to an hour, then you're good. You don't have to keep on trying to walk more every day for the rest of your life. But once you hit that hour threshold, then just try to walk an hour a day. And again, you know, that's a very specific program where his idea is that you'll lose weight if you do that. It's all about walk yourself thin. But I think it also just generally makes sense that, you know, if you walk every day, you'll get stronger as you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So even your friends, can't you
Yeah.
tell them?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can walk, just maybe not as far as me, as fast as any, but you can walk. Sounds like we're wrapping up.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah.
Excellent.
My pleasure. Thank you all.